There's a kind of loneliness that feels strange. You don't live alone. You have a family. Voices echo around you. People call your name every day. But how long has it been since anyone truly saw you? Since anyone asked? How have you really been? Lately. That's all. Not are you okay? Not are you tired? Just how are you really living? Maybe. You used to be the one who held everyone together. The one who stepped up when something went wrong. The one everyone believed was strong, resilient, logical. And slowly, no one asked about you anymore. You became the keeper of the flame, but no one thought to keep you. You sit in the house hearing their voices and laughter. Looking around, everyone's still here. No one left, except you. Somewhere along the way you disappeared. Maybe you've been loving them your whole life. Loving in silence. Loving through your actions, your sense of duty, your endurance. But the more you loved, the more disconnected you felt. Not because you lacked love, but because the love you carry is too deep and too different. That is the question this video holds. If I love my family so much, why do I always feel like an outsider? If that question has ever echoed inside you, stay until the end. Because sometimes, the answer isn't found in explanation, but in remembering how deeply you loved and how slowly you disappeared. In the very home you tried to protect. Have you ever felt this way, sitting in a familiar house, next to the people you grew up with? Hearing the laughter, the small talk, the clinking of bowls and chopsticks, and still feeling like you don't belong, not because you hate them, not because you want distance, but because a very real part of you ever had a chance to exist in their presence. You thought it was your fault. Why can't you just be natural like everyone else? Why does it feel awkward every time you speak from the heart? Why are you so exhausted even though no one's doing anything wrong? You started learning how to go silent, not because you had nothing to say, but because you knew. No one would truly hear it. They'd nod, offer advice, interrupt, but they wouldn't actually hear you. And so you learned how to survive in that atmosphere. Like a little branch trying to grow in the shadows, not enough light, not enough soil, but still holding on, still trying to stay green. Maybe you were the quiet child, the one praised for being obedient, for not causing trouble. But no one saw. You had simply grown used to not being understood. You stopped telling stories, stopped crying out loud, stopped asking why you felt so lonely. You just grew up in silence. And then time passed. You became an adult, maybe a mother, a father, the one holding everything together. Maybe you're working hard, carrying so many responsibilities, and everyone sees you as someone who's fine. But inside, that same feeling of alienation never really left. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." Loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being unable to share what truly matters with anyone. You live in your family, but no one sees the deepest parts of you. No one knows that you've always loved them so much, but you don't know how to love without feeling lost. You tried. There was a time you opened up, shared something that had been weighing on you, and then you saw that look. Not anger, not rejection, just distance, foreignness, and a quiet layer of judgment. You gave a half smile, changed the subject, and from that day on, you stopped trying. You loved them. No one can deny that. And because you loved them, you chose to step back. You didn't want to make them uncomfortable, didn't want to be the one who ruins the mood. You loved through quiet care, remembering birthdays, tucking small offerings into meals, messages, glances. You loved without needing gratitude, without needing to be acknowledged, as long as they were okay. But who has ever loved you? Maybe you don't fit in your family, not because you're not good enough, not because you're strange, but because you carry a way of loving that goes beyond words, a kind of love that doesn't need to be understood to be real. Carl Jung called it love rooted in the self, a love that doesn't come from the ego, but from the soul, where the ego has been stripped away. And only the purest essence remains, the will to connect without needing to possess. You don't fit in with your family, but the love you have for them is spiritual. It's not loud. It doesn't demand. It's like a candle burning quietly in a dark room, silently keeping warmth for those who never noticed it. If you've ever lived like that, if you're loving someone in silence and don't know how to speak it, just leave something behind. A word, a dot, a quiet space, not for anyone else to understand, but for you to know. You're not the only one. And then a question begins to echo no longer as a sob, but as a whisper from the soul. If I love them this deeply, why do I still feel like a stranger in my own home? In the next part, we will open a new door, a place where family doesn't have to understand you to be real, and love without words might just be the most real love of all. There is a kind of love that doesn't need to be named, doesn't need to be returned, and doesn't need to be understood to exist with such quiet depth. It's the kind of love you carry for your family, not born from closeness, not built on heart-to-heart conversations, not rooted in feeling like you belong. In fact, you've always felt like you don't belong, and yet you love them deeply. You love them not because they understand you, but because your heart chose to love them long before you had the words to explain it. That love didn't come from reason. It needed no conditions. It's a silent current flowing through every gesture, every glance, every quiet worry you never put into words. Maybe you've never said I love you out loud. Maybe you don't ask about their day with sweet words, but you remember who likes what food, who stays up late, who's having a rough day even when they don't say a word. You live in a state of quiet awareness and gentle care. No one taught you to love this way. It just came naturally. Carl Jung once spoke of a connection beyond the ego, a realm where relationships didn't need to be affirmed with language. He called it a spiritual bond between souls. It doesn't rely on similarity. It doesn't demand understanding. It simply says, I know I was sent here to love, even if they never understand that. And that's how you've lived. Alone, with a love that has no name. No one knows you quietly protect them. No one knows how many words you've swallowed just to keep the peace in the house. No one knows how many late nights you've stayed up just to check who's still awake and who's finally sleeping. There were moments you asked yourself, what's the point of loving this much when no one seems to need it? And still you kept going, not because they noticed, but because if you didn't do it, you couldn't rest easy. Your love doesn't look like the movies. No warm hugs, no poetic words. Your love looks like cooking a meal no one thanks you for, listening to stories that bore you without interrupting, coming home exhausted but still asking if someone else has eaten. You thought everyone lived this way, until you realized no one else does. You don't fit in with your family. You speak less. You think more. You look at things from the inside while they live mostly on the outside. They say you're hard to understand, cold, closed off, but if they ever spent a single day inside your mind, they would see behind that silence is a love that borders on sacred. Carl Jung called it love from the self, a kind of love that doesn't rise from personal desire, but from a sacred awareness within every soul that has matured. You don't love to be loved back. You love because you can't do otherwise. You don't fit in with your family, but the love you carry for them is a spiritual commitment. No one asked you to love. You still chose to love. No one expected you to sacrifice. You still quietly do it every day. And if someone asked you, why do you keep doing this? You probably wouldn't have a clear answer. Only that your heart knows no other way. If these words speak to you, leave something below. It doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. Because maybe someone else is quietly living like you, waiting for a small confirmation that says I'm not alone. And then, a sharper question begins to rise. If I love them this deeply, why does it hurt every time I open my heart? Could it be that love, when unseen, can also become a wound? Stay with this space, because in the next part, we'll enter one of the darkest corners, the pain of invisible love. You love them, quietly, without demands. You never needed praise. You never asked to be called selfless. You only ever wanted one small thing, just one that someone might see you. But no one did, and the pain began there. Have you ever had this moment? You prepared a thoughtful meal, just because you knew your mother was tired, just because your father seemed distant, just because you wanted someone to feel cared for. But when dinner ended, no one remembered what you had done. No one looked at you. No one asked, "How are you doing today?" They walked past you, like you were just another object in the house. Useful, present, but invisible. You had opened your heart once. Truly. Said something real from deep inside. Maybe just "I'm feeling tired. I'm not doing so well." And they replied, "There's nothing to be tired about. Don't overthink things. You'll understand when you're older." Just a few words. But after that, you never spoke your truth again. Carl Jung called this the soul's defense mechanism. When the self is no longer heard, it retreats, withdraws inward. It shields itself from further hurt by quietly closing the heart. And you begin living as a version of yourself with the realest parts pulled away. You play your role. You answer small talk. You show up when needed. You cause no trouble. But you're no longer fully there. You disappear even while still standing inside that same house. Someone once said love that goes unseen slowly becomes sadness, then resentment, and eventually despair. You didn't want anyone to see you cry. You told yourself, it's okay, as long as they're okay. But some nights you sat quietly outside a bedroom door and cried like a child abandoned in their own family. Not because they hated you, but because they never understood how you love. You loved in silence, with patience, by always being there even when no one needed you. You were the one keeping the family from falling apart, and the only one no one ever thought to hold on to. Carl Jung once said, "That which is not made conscious appears in our lives as fate. If this pain remains unacknowledged, it will repeat. You'll keep loving without being seen. You'll keep giving without being remembered. And one day, you'll start to believe maybe I was never meant to be loved the way I love others." But that's not true. It has never been true. You don't fit in with your family not because you're too different, but because the way you love goes beyond the patterns they've ever known. You are not wrong for loving deeper than they can understand. You just need to remember one thing: your love is real, even if no one sees it. If you've ever lived like this, loving in silence, sacrificing without acknowledgement, and crying alone in a house full of people, subscribe to this channel, because maybe it's been too long since you had a place where you truly belong. A place where you don't have to explain, don't have to be strong, and don't have to be the one who's fine all the time. Just you, with a heart that has loved too much and never been fully seen. And in the next part, we'll go even deeper into the role of the silent carrier in the family and ask, if I have no one to lean on, do I still have enough left to keep going? Some people weren't born to live lightly. They were born to hold things together. You're one of them, the one who's always there when the family needs something, the one who silently fixes what's falling apart, the one who holds everything up when no one else can, the one who stands between conflicts just to keep the peace. You've grown used to being the one who knows what to do. They come to you when things go wrong, ask for advice, hand you responsibilities, and you take them on. No one sees the fatigue. No one notices the quiet fading in your eyes after you say, "Yeah, I'll handle it." You do it because if you don't, no one else will. But slowly, you become the one who must do it. You're no longer allowed to say no. You're no longer allowed to be weak. There were nights when you collapsed inside feeling like the whole world was sitting on your shoulders. And the next morning you still got up, cooked, cleaned, worked, took care of the kids, called your parents. You tried to sit down once and quietly asked yourself, has anyone ever carried me? And the answer was usually silence. Carl Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. No one becomes conscious without walking through pain." And you've awakened through that very pain. When you realized you've always loved others through action, always carried things for everyone else, but never, not once, has anyone put a hand on your shoulder and said, "Let me carry this for you, just for today." You don't fit in with your family, not because you rebel, but because you had to grow up too soon. You understood everyone too quickly, but no one ever truly tried to understand you. You loved them, but couldn't lean on them. You made sure everyone was okay, but had no one to hand your pain to. There was a night, maybe, when you sat in the kitchen after everyone else had gone to sleep. Only the dim glow of a yellow light remained. You sat there, arms resting on the table, feeling like you were the only one still awake in a house full of peaceful dreams. You didn't cry. You didn't complain. You just felt something inside wearing down, like a flame that had burned too long without anyone adding wood. You're the one who keeps the fire going in your family, but no one thinks to keep you. You listen to everyone, but no one listens to you. You check in on everyone, but no one asks in return. Are you tired? Maybe you've waited, not for something grand, just for a small message, a hug without reason, a tiny gesture to remind you you're human, not a machine built to endure. But it didn't come, and you kept going, like always. You don't need praise. You're not asking to be celebrated. You only want something simple, the permission, not to be strong, just once, to not hold it all together, to not overthink. Just one moment of quiet where someone takes your hand and says, "Today, you don't have to carry anything." What's draining you isn't the weight of responsibility. It's the loneliness right in the middle of the very people you've been trying to protect. And maybe, deep down, you don't fit in with your family because you've become the one who carries everything for the entire system. A nameless role. No one asked you to take it, but you stepped into it anyway because you couldn't bear to let it all fall apart. When love turns into duty, when endurance becomes a habit, when silence becomes the only way to survive, that's when you're no longer living for yourself. You're living to keep everyone else in place while quietly disappearing from your own life. You used to believe if I'm strong enough, they'll be okay. But now you're starting to see, because you're always okay, no one ever thinks to check if you need to be held. And so you keep carrying, keep living, keep wearing down. In a family where everyone assumes you're the one who never falls, and quietly, a question begins to rise. If one day I no longer have the strength, will anyone see it before it's too late? You were the one who kept everything from falling apart. You patched up the arguments. You spoke on behalf of the ones who couldn't speak to each other. You were the bridge, the peacemaker, the one people naturally turned to when they needed someone to keep the peace. But on the days when things finally calmed down, there was no one left for you to lean on. You once saved a plate of food for someone coming home late. You kept silent through hurtful words because you didn't want to add more tension to a fragile relationship. You gave up your bed so someone else could sleep well and lay curled on a couch just because you didn't want anyone to feel left out. You were always the one who could handle it, the one who said it's fine, the one who whispered I've got it. And because of that, no one thought to hold you when you started slipping away from your own heart. You were the hand on someone's shoulder when they were breaking, but you were also the one sitting in silence at midnight when no one else was awake. You were the one people called when they needed something, but no one ever asked, when was the last time someone reached out to you? Just because Carl Jung once said, in each of us there is another whom we do not know. In every person there is a version of themselves they no longer recognize. And you began to drift away from yours, from the version that used to be soft, hopeful, willing to dream. You still function, still show up, still carry your responsibilities. But inside, you're just a shell holding your family together while quietly falling apart. You never blame them, not once. You just wish they could see more than what you do, that they'd notice the cost you paid to hold everything in place. You learned to handle things alone. No help, no asking, no expectation. Not because you didn't want support, but because you'd been disappointed enough to stop hoping for it. One day you paused in the middle of it all. Not because you were tired, but because it suddenly hit you. I've never been the one someone fought to keep. People choose each other. They hold on. They notice. But not with you. You were always the one who kept everyone steady, but were never the one someone reached for when you were falling. You were the hand that guided them through storms, the one who knew when to step back, who yielded, who endured. And because of that, you became the one easiest to forget once the storm had passed. You don't fit in with your family because you've stopped being a feeling in their hearts. You became a function, a role, a shadow silently holding everything in place unseen and never considered someone worth holding on to. There is a kind of loneliness that's eerily quiet. It's when you sit among the people you love most and realize if you vanished from this dinner table, everything would go on. And maybe no one would even notice how long you've been silent. You were the one who held them, held the fragile parts of the relationship, held the connection, held the kindness, held the atmosphere, held everything no one else bothered to hold. But who held you? If someone comes to mind right now, someone who lives this way too, quietly, strongly, and unseen, send them this video, a message, a whisper, a soft tap on the heart. Because sometimes, just one person seeing your effort is enough to keep a heart from breaking further. Not everyone needs to hear this, but someone might need it more than you think. At some point in your life, you stopped expecting. Not because you didn't feel anymore, not because your heart turned cold, but because disappointment came too many times. And with each one, you quietly pulled your heart deeper inside, a little further back each time. You once hoped someone would ask how your day was when you came home late. You wished for a small message. Have you eaten? You believed that? If you cared enough, they would eventually realize you needed love too. But the moment never came. And from that silence, you learned to love unconditionally because you didn't know how not to. You loved through action, through presence, through silently caring what no one else sees. You never needed praise. Only that someone just once might notice the loneliness behind your eyes at the end of a long day. But that rarely ever happened. Carl Jung once said, "A thing becomes moral only when we choose it freely." And love is the same. It only becomes real when we give it not from obligation, but because our soul refuses to stay silent. You don't love to be loved back. You love because you carry the frequency of care, of compassion, of gratitude that asks for nothing in return. You know how to make people feel seen, but you can't remember the last time someone made you feel seen. You're always there when someone needs you, but no one knows how often you wake at 3 a.m. feeling like you're disappearing from your own life. You're the one everyone assumes doesn't need to be checked on, because you're strong, you're independent, you don't ask for anything. And so, they forget you're human too, that you get tired, that you get lost, that sometimes you wish someone would just look at you and ask, "Are you okay?" Maybe you once believed if you gave enough, they would understand your worth. They would hold on to you, but you came to realize some people only learn how to receive and never how to keep anyone. You don't fit in with your family because you became the ground beneath their feet, a foundation they leaned on without ever touching the weary soil inside you. You turned love into habit, into reflex, into something that no longer needed conditions. But your heart is still a heart. It can still break. It still has limits. It still has nights when all it wants is to fall apart in silence. Maybe you've grown used to asking for nothing. You say I'm fine because you don't want to burden anyone. You know how to walk alone because no one ever walked beside you. You used to dream of a place where you could rest, be loved without having to prove anything. Just to be seen and chosen. That's all. You once believed, as long as they're happy, you'll be okay. But a quiet part of you knows if you keep living this way, there will come a time when you'll have nothing left to give. And still you continue. Not because they deserve it, not because you're naive, but because you simply don't know how to love any other way. Because the love inside you isn't a strategy. It's your nature. It's something beyond logic, beyond calculation, beyond even the times you swore to yourself, "This time I won't love again." You've learned to love without being loved back. You've become the empty space where others could breathe freely. But sometimes you quietly wonder, if I truly disappeared, would anyone feel the absence? Would anyone try to keep me? That question lingers. And one day another question begins to rise, one that might change everything. If I've spent so long living for them, what would happen if I finally started living for myself? One day, after hundreds of times silencing your own feelings, you wake up and something inside you is no longer quiet. You don't scream. You don't rebel. You don't walk away. You just no longer want to keep trading your own existence in order to preserve something called stability. You begin to gather the small pieces of yourself again, not to fight anyone, but to stop fighting yourself. You start declining conversations that drain you, letting go of roles that no longer reflect your heart. You begin to quietly withdraw your energy from the places that only know how to take and never give you anything but duty in return. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming yourself, no longer living by someone else's expectations. You don't need to shout to be seen. You just need to stop hiding, stop shrinking to fit into the frame others built for you. You begin asking simple questions again. Do I actually want to be at this dinner table? Am I truly listening or just playing the role of someone who listens? Do I still exist in this family as a human or just as a function? And when the answers become clear, you begin to stand up. Not in anger, but in return to yourself. You begin to live slower, eat what you enjoy, go where your heart pulls you. No explaining, no asking for permission, no more guilt. You begin to listen to yourself, after years of only listening to others, and for the first time in a long while, you feel touched from within. No one understands what's happening, because you're still there, still going to work, still coming home, still quiet. But now, you no longer try to do what's right. You begin doing what's real. You still love them, but you no longer sacrifice yourself just to keep them close. You no longer sit through conversations that leave you breathless. You no longer smile when silence is what your heart really wants. You no longer say, "It's okay," when your soul is tired. You begin placing your hand over your chest and asking, "What do I need today?" A deep sleep, an uninterrupted hour, a hug for no reason, or simply to be alone without guilt. You didn't abandon your family. You just stopped abandoning yourself. You didn't stop loving. You just chose to love in a way that doesn't hurt you anymore. You didn't reject your role. You simply stopped trading your soul to fulfill it. You don't fit in with your family, and now you're no longer trying to. Because maybe you weren't meant to blend in, but to remind them of a deeper kind of love, one that doesn't conform, doesn't possess, doesn't control, only presence, only freedom. If you've ever loved so much that you lost yourself in the process and are now learning how to return, leave a comment, say something true, share a moment when you chose yourself, even just once, and share this video with someone you know who has carried the entire family but was never held in return. Not everyone needs this, but someone might need it more than you realize. And if you'd like to walk this journey with other souls doing the same, subscribe to this channel, not for updates, not for tracking, but because you deserve a place where you can be seen, be heard, and stop bracing yourself just to exist. You no longer belong to the place where you have to disappear to be accepted. Now, you belong to yourself.